How are you guys?
Good.
It's the worst question you could have started off asking.
No, it's not. Why?
Because the answer's always going to be good.
That's
No,
good.
just don't. Be busy. You've just come back from annual leave.
A little bit busy.
It's all right for some, isn't it?
Yeah.
Annual leave.
Yeah, that's you, mate. 3 weeks off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Free. Well, you got 2.5 weeks off.
Yeah, you
That's
have actually.
12 days.
That's a good point.
That's 2.5 weeks, 12 days.
That's a great way to start this next topic. So, recruitment,
Yeah.
especially when people are off during this season. How do you think people manage? How do you think people cope? Especially contractors. If you've got a chippy on site or a roofer on site, and then he says, "I'm not here for 2 weeks," what do you do?
So there's a few things I think people might be able to look at. So you're either going to have to replace them with someone else, but then again, you've got then potentially different people working on different sections of the same site, which might cause other issues. Again, even with that being said, their rates are going to change. So it's highly unlikely that they're being charged out at the same price. So again, things like annual leave and people going off site, even for like subcontractors, might cause bigger issues for main contractors. So they might have an agreement and a time frame set out with someone to finish a certain element of works within a time frame. And if this is overrunning and might then be delayed due to someone's annual leave, it's then going to cause bigger issues across the site, especially if you can't continue the next sequence of works.
Okay. So if we've got a site, and if we were a main contractor, which we're not, with consultants, but if you started a site which was like 12 months long, how do you ask your subcontractor if they've got holidays during that period? Because you can't really, because they're a subcontractor, ain't they?
Yeah.
I would say. So you can't go, oh, in the next 12, 18 months, have you got any holidays planned?
I don't even think that is a question that gets asked to them.
Well, it isn't. But
No,
then,
think
you wouldn't be able to.
I think it's more so what's your price? Here's when we're starting on site. I need you there when I need you there.
so how do you manage that? How do you manage that process?
That's a hard one.
You can't, can you?
On
I wonder
site.
if anyone's actually ever asked that question. Like, oh, you're going to be our plumber on the site, 2-year site. You got any holidays planned? Because if they do, then how do you manage?
I
that
have a
process?
feeling it's just they're just going to go with someone else once they're on holiday, and whether they then go back to that original subcontractor depends on what terms of agreement they've got with them. They might then go back to them, or they might then stay with the other contractor who was able to facilitate what they needed when they needed it.
That's interesting.
Would they be able to do that though? If you've come on site as a subcontractor and then you go on annual leave and then you come back and then they say, "We don't need you anymore."
No one's going to want to do that. You ain't going to want you. If we were managing a site or doing the valuations on a site, you ain't going to want to see one plumbing contractor at the start and then another one finishing off, because it doesn't help with the process. But that's an interesting one with recruitment. What about recruitment generally in consultancy? You do our recruitment, so how do you think the industry's been?
I'd say it's remained the same for quite a while, in the sense of I feel we're seeing a lot of junior estimators and a lot of junior, like we've had it recently where junior quantity surveyors, so they're not necessarily looking for a senior role, so they might have obviously less experience or even no experience when you're looking at like from the estimating side, but actually finding people with extensive experience in the more senior roles is finding difficult.
Do you think that's a skills gap?
Potentially, yeah.
And do we actually think that's a skills gap across the board in construction, or just specific to QSE and estimating and project management?
I would say more so. I mean, what I've found is when I've been doing, so like if I've done like speaking events for like recruitment in construction, more so my side is like women in construction, but I'd say a lot of the questions is, what does a quantity surveyor do? That's one of the biggest questions. I don't think there's that typical like you go out on site, like you do like labourer work and stuff like that, but from in terms of like what a quantity surveyor does in a day-to-day, your office environment, or do they go out to site? I don't think people are necessarily clued up on what they actually do, and it's probably not necessarily something that's brought up too much when in terms of like, when you're in college. I've seen the courses that you look at, and I'd say a lot of them are more labourer work.
Construction related.
Yeah.
I think you speak to more clients than probably us, but we speak more on the technical side to clients. But at the front end, do you feel like that's something that contractors struggle with, is finding subcontractors, or do you think they're struggling with finding work
I'd say finding work
at the moment?
at the moment, yeah. Or they're finding the work, but we were actually saying earlier about the fact that, especially at the moment, the sort of, I don't want to say trend, but we are seeing a lot of clients, they're up against a lot more contractors. So from a work perspective, you know, they are getting work, but it might be that they're struggling a little bit with, in terms of how many people are going up for that specific project.
That's a great flip side argument though, because as a client then, or an end user developer, you've got a pool of more contractors, haven't you?
Yeah, so it's more beneficial for them, because you're going to have more people putting in prices against each other, and after their prices start getting known, they're going to all want to beat each other to get the work in. And again, if there is a client that is short on work, they're probably going to be happier to reduce their margin down a bit, reduce their rates down a little bit, put in a more competitive price to make sure they get the work in, which is then going to benefit the client a lot more to go out to more contractors.
Yeah, because I guess probably 12, 18 months ago, it was more the contractors in a position where, well, actually, we're really busy, so we don't need this. Well, yeah, you can pick and choose. Whereas now, if based on what you're saying, there's way more contractors in the pool. Before, if you were trying to choose 3, or you were trying to recruit 1 of 3, and now it's 1 of 7, the shoe's on the other foot. So now the client, the developer, the architect kind of has control of the situation, because they've got a pool of contractors that they could recruit from effectively.
Yeah,
so they get better deals.
Yeah, so it's on the flip side of that as well. That might be because developers are putting projects on pause, or homeowners are then questioning, all right, do I want to do an extension at the moment, or do I want to do this new build at the moment, or should I hold off? And that being said, that then there might be less projects out there for the contractors to do. So whereas they had a lot of choice beforehand, they're then running out of choice and being offered less work, and again having to then look at recruitment for subcontractors. Do they want to take more staff on? Do they want to grow their team, or due to their prices being lower, are they trying to get the same job done but with only 3 people rather than 4 people? Again, that's something that they'll probably need to take into account.
Going back to the work in construction, did you see a stat? And I actually can't remember what stat it was, like figure, but there's a shortage of builders. Like, they've made that very clear. Yeah. Like, there's a shortage, and that's why they're trying to push it more so in younger kids who are at school, and they're not, you know, they've got an eye for construction, but I think they are trying to sort of showcase it a lot more, because they've made it very clear that there's a shortage.
I think the thing here is, it's not a sexy industry, is it? You know, it's not social media, and it's not hospitality. It's not like you can get behind a camera, and it's not something a lot of people talk about. It's a massively needed industry. Without construction, you know, I think we're the second or third biggest industry in the UK, but it's not sexy like that young people, you know, you're not enthusiastic about going into construction, whereas you might be enthusiastic about going into marketing or design or something like that, which is a lot quirkier to go into, you know, becoming an influencer. Well, you know, construction's not that. So if you had the pick of what you wanted to do as someone younger now, someone's not going to go, oh, well, you know what, rather than be a social media influencer or a marketeer, I'm going to go and become a plumber.
And I think, and now as well, it's a lot more, especially if you're on site and you're doing works in construction, it's a lot more physically demanding as well.
Yes, absolutely.
And if you ask someone if they can go and earn this sitting in the office, or if they can go and do this off their phone and earn 50,000, or if they can go and be a plumber and do a lot of manual labour, longer hours, earlier hours, and still get 50,000, they then have that to weigh up.
Yeah. And that, I guess that's definitely going to make recruitment more challenging in our industry, because we're skill shortage, you know, we can't get the labour, and it's not a sexy industry to go into. People don't want to be like, oh, I'm going to become a builder, because it is hard work. It's a graft.
I definitely see the trend more, and you'll agree with this, is when you get someone who's coming in as like a junior, the trends does seem to be, I'm not saying that you don't get any where they've not really got any like relevance to like a family member, but it is more so often than not that it might be that, you know, their dad's been a builder or their brother, or there's always that like relation to a family member. So that does play a part, I think, in someone's like
I feel like it's some people, like you said, that whether they know them or they know someone who is, or a family member pushing them in that direction.
Yeah.
I do feel like there's less people coming through that's like, right, I've seen this and this is really what I want to do. Again, I don't know if that's because these sorts of roles or some roles in construction have less exposure, but yeah, it seems like a lot of junior young people leaving the school and things like this are having, or there is less of coming into construction.
Interesting. With all three very competent professionals in the construction industry, I've got kids, you two haven't. If your younger peers or in the future children were to ask you whether they should come into construction, what would you say?
Well, I'd say yes, but that's a bit biased because we're in construction, right? But no, I think construction's an industry that, like you said, is always needed and it's always going to be there, and it's only going to end up venturing out into different avenues. And if it does change, but at the end of the day, people are always going to need houses. There's always going to be new buildings getting put up, and whether it's on-site or office-based, everyone still plays a part in it.
Okay.
And there's so many different roles in construction as well. Like you say, I know we're talking about on-site and more so like labour and work and stuff like that, but actually there are a lot more variety of roles that people can go into. So I know what I found is when you associate when you think of construction, you associate it to being on site, but that doesn't necessarily mean that either. So if you're not necessarily looking for, you know, you don't want to be on site, that's also fine. That doesn't then mean that construction is not for you. You can then go into a different avenue.
Yeah, well, again, there's a lot of different skill sets will fit in construction still. Like if you've got more of a design skill set, maybe you look into architecture or into interior design, which is still in construction. Or if you've got more of a methodical thinking process, maybe you look at quantity surveying, estimating, something like this. Again, there's a lot of different avenues for a lot of different skill sets as well, maths based, design based, English based, like writing contracts in QSing, things like this as well. There's a lot of different areas for different skills.
Question, did you always know you wanted to go into construction, or was it new?
Construction was always there for me, again with my dad originally being in the electrician trade, so that was always there for me. And design is something I've always done. So again, originally like product design is stuff I do, architectural drawings is things I'd always looked at. So for me, construction was always there and the right sort of foundation for it, and I enjoyed it. Estimating weren't originally the first role that I'd looked at, but it was something that fit my skill set well.
That's probably a question for you.
No. No, I didn't. I really didn't. But mine was more so, being completely honest, it was a case of I wanted progression and the opportunity came up, and I think it is a little bit different though. I think I'm not going to go into that whole women in construction thing, but I definitely think it is a little bit more daunting in terms of I actually associated, I know obviously you've got like administration roles and stuff like that, but I did associate a lot of construction to do with being on site, and it was only until I came into this role that I've obviously seen of the more, so I've obviously spoken to architects and the different varieties of roles. I've then obviously come to realise that there's a lot of different avenues. But if you were asking me at 15 years old if I was going to go into construction, then no, I would have said no.
Would you recommend it to young girls though? Yeah,
100%. I would. If I had children and it was it's a girl and she wanted to go into construction, I'd definitely I'd encourage her to do so if that's what she wanted to do, because I think there's room for women in construction. And obviously even taking myself into account there, like I think there's a lot of money into construction as well. There's a lot of money.
If you do it right.
100%. But like you were saying, like there's always going to need to be building work.
Yeah, there's a lot of variety in roles as well. If you once you've built up all of your knowledge in a certain position, there's nothing to say that you can't then venture off into another role that's still in construction, and your foundation of knowledge you've got from your other position is still likely going to apply, and then you work on some more knowledge in the new position. Again, so once you've got your foundation of knowledge in certain roles, which obviously for an example I'd give is estimating, after you've got your standard knowledge of reading and understanding architectural plans, specs, taking measurements, understanding of drawings and projects and programs. There's nothing to say you can't take your skills elsewhere in construction.
And it's not even different sectors, it's international. You know, once you understand the basic concept of how something's built, realistically it's technical from there. It's right, okay, we use a masonry build up here in the UK, typically have done. Things are changing a little bit now. In America they use timber frame, but it doesn't mean once you understand typically how something's built up, you could probably take your skill set of construction and take it anywhere in the world, and know that you could find a role that you could actually be successful in. So I personally think it's a great industry to be in, and I think it's definitely something that I would encourage people to go into, because I think, yes, it's not sexy, but I think you learn a lot. You become very versatile as an individual because of the array of people that you get to talk to.
That's another point as well, isn't it? Again, you're dealing with a lot of characters and a lot of personalities, and you're speaking to a lot of people. Again, you're speaking to contractors who are on site, you're speaking to architects who think in this way, quantity surveyors who think in this way, and it's, again, like you said, broadening your horizons on dealing with a lot of variety of people.
What do we think would make construction sexy, or can it be sexy?
I got a clue, mate.
What about you, Katie?
Well, you've been using the words. So
okay, so it looks
what
like I'm having to answer my own question here. I think we would struggle to do that. I think from a construction perspective, it maybe isn't the go-to industry of choice. It's hugely interesting. You learn life skills that you probably wouldn't learn in a lot of other industries. It's not glamorous, but it doesn't mean we can't make it glamorous. You know, when we look at our social media and we look at our marketing, we can make it glamorous. Construction projects can be fun.
You got to think of some sections of construction is glamorous. You think of interior design, for example, producing like mood boards and internal renders, external renders, again, helping set someone's vision up. So speaking with a homeowner, understanding products and new materials that are on the line with different looks, different like textures, things like this. There's a lot of thought that goes into concepts and design that does visually look appealing. That after you do make like a mood board or an internal render and you're showing it to a client, this is what your home could look like. That is then like visually attracting or pulls people's eye in, and it's something that has a lot of variety, because no person's house or your design's ever going to look too similar, especially on your more high-end bespoke projects, or if you're doing like hotels or branding for someone or signage. Things like this are always going to look different.
We've worked on some beautiful projects.
Oh, we've worked on some epic projects.
Really
and that's the thing. That is the thing. In construction, when people talk about construction, they think, oh, we're just building 3-bed box houses. But actually, if you look at every building, every road, everything we do in the world is essentially in some type of building. You know, you go for dinner in really fancy restaurants. Someone's had to work on that project, and they've had to make that vision come to life. And that's everything from design to management to QSing to construction. So it may not seem like it's a sexy industry, but what we do is very interesting and it's different, and you get to be involved in some really quirky stuff and some quirky ideas. So it probably never gets seen as a sexy industry, but it doesn't mean that what you do can't be turned into something more interesting.
I think as well, coming back down to social media, what you were saying a little bit earlier about like the types of videos and stuff we do, I think a lot of our clients who are on site day to day, they might not have time to run their accounts, or a lot of what I hear from clients, we've got some really good clients of ours, and they'll say about our social media, and they'll, you know, they've even broached you sometimes to see if you can help with their marketing and stuff like that. But you know, when it comes back down to visual, you know, if clients were looking to open and expand their social media more, I think that could help in when you're talking about visuals and putting about what you do there in terms of like the projects that you work on. you know, getting good quality video, you know, videographers to come in and record the works that you're doing and the types of projects you're doing.
Yeah.
Like that takes time and that takes obviously effort, but I think sometimes that can be lapsed a little bit.
I think the interesting point there is that actually good marketing is all surrounded by people, and construction is all about people. You know, when you look at a typical construction site, there'll be dozens, if not tens of dozens of people, depending on the type, size, scale of the project. And that can be a fun working environment depending on the type of characters you got on site. So you could make something fun on social, and the working environment can be fun. I understand it's pressured, but I guess every working environment is pressured in some way. But I don't see why we can't make our industry a great industry to be in, and somewhere where people come to and join when you look at recruitment. And I think we're an amazing industry, which is fantastic.